I was 34 when my life took an unexpected turn. Growing up, I always knew my parents favored my sister Natalie. While I built my software engineering career through hard work, they showered her with attention and support. My grandparents were different, though. They raised me when my parents were too busy teaching me values that shaped who I am today. Their substantial wealth was something I never thought about until I overheard my parents discussing how to manipulate my grandparents into changing their will. Before I tell you how my grandparents saved my future, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama gets your blood pumping too. Family has always been a complicated concept for me. I grew up in a comfortable suburb of Seattle where my parents prioritized their careers in corporate law and finance over family time. From my earliest memories, it was my grandparents, Edward and Margaret Thompson, who filled the parental void. They lived just 30 minutes away in a beautiful lakeside estate that represented the real estate empire they had built from nothing after immigrating from Ireland in their 20s. My sister Natalie came along when I was 3 years old, and from the moment she arrived, the family dynamic shifted. While I was the quiet, thoughtful child who preferred books and computers, Natalie was outgoing, theatrical, and knew exactly how to charm our parents. By elementary school, the pattern was clear. Natalie was the golden child, and I was an afterthought in my parents' world. Summers at my grandparents' estate became my sanctuary. Grandpa Edward taught me to fish build things with my hands and understand the value of hard work. Grandma Margaret, with her warm smile and endless patience, would bake cookies while teaching me about investments and business ethics. They never played favorites between Natalie and me, but I could tell they worried about how my parents treated me. When I was 12, Grandpa took me on a tour of his real estate holdings. We visited apartment buildings, office complexes, and retail centers all over the Pacific Northwest. I still remember him saying, "Angelo, someday this will belong to you and Natalie. What matters most is not what you inherit, but what you do with it. Are you going to build something meaningful or just consume what others have built?" Those words stuck with me through the years, especially when the difference in how my parents treated us became impossible to ignore. My high school graduation was a perfect example. Despite being named valedictorian with a full scholarship to Stanford, my parents skipped my graduation speech because they had tickets to a charity gala. 3 years later, they threw an extravagant party for Natalie when she graduated with average grades and no clear direction. College widened the gap further. I worked part-time jobs to cover my living expenses while studying computer science, often going weeks without hearing from my parents. Meanwhile, they fully funded Natalie through 5 different majors at 3 different universities, none of which she completed. Each time she lost interest or found courses too challenging, our parents justified her starting over as her being a free spirit finding her path. After graduating, I landed a job at a promising tech startup in Seattle. I rented a small apartment, lived frugally, and began building my career without any family support. My grandparents, however, never missed a chance to express their pride. When my first major software project launched, they were the ones who took me to dinner and toasted my success. My parents only learned about it months later when Grandma mentioned it at Thanksgiving. As I established my independence, my relationship with my parents became increasingly distant and formal. We spoke only during major holidays or family events. Natalie, meanwhile, continued her pattern of dependency, moving back home at 27 after another failed attempt at college, this time in fashion design. She worked part-time at a boutique that our parents partially funded, spending most of her income on clothes and travel. Throughout all this, my bond with my grandparents grew stronger. Every Sunday, I would visit them for dinner, help Grandpa with household projects, or assist Grandma with organizing their extensive library. They became my true family mentors, who guided me through early adulthood with wisdom and unconditional support. When my grandparents celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary, They hosted a lavish party at their estate. During the celebration, I noticed unusual tension between them and my parents. Later that evening, I overheard fragments of a heated conversation between my father and grandfather in the study. Words like fair distribution and family loyalty stood out, followed by my grandfather firmly stating, "That is not what we discussed, Richard. Margaret and I have been clear about our intentions." At the time, I dismissed it as some minor disagreement, never imagining the betrayal that was brewing beneath the surface. I believed in my grandparents' sense of fairness and assumed any inheritance would be split equally between Natalie and me. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the signs that my parents were already working to influence my grandparents' estate planning in Natalie's favor. The tension I sensed that night was just the beginning of a family drama that would test bonds, reveal true characters, and ultimately change the course of all our lives. I had no idea how far my parents would go to secure everything for their favorite daughter, or how my grandparents would respond when they discovered the manipulation. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in November. I was in the middle of a project meeting when my phone lit up with a call from my grandmother. Her voice trembled as she told me Grandpa Edward had suffered a heart attack and was in the hospital. I dropped everything and drove straight there, my mind racing with worry about the man who had been more of a father to me than my own. When I arrived at Seattle Memorial, I found my grandmother sitting alone in the waiting room, her normally perfect posture crumpled with worry. I hugged her tightly, assuring her that Grandpa was strong and would pull through. Only after settling her with a cup of tea did she mention that she had called my parents and Natalie, but they hadn't arrived yet. 3 hours later, after the doctors had stabilized my grandfather and moved him to the cardiac care unit, my parents and Natalie finally appeared. They made a dramatic entrance, my mother dabbing at invisible tears, while my father immediately cornered the doctor for information. Natalie made a show of comforting Grandma, posing as if for an invisible camera while whispering, "It will be okay, Grandma. We are all here for you now." I noticed how they barely acknowledged my presence, as if my being there first somehow diminished their performance of family concern. What struck me most was the calculated nature of their behavior, the way they spoke loudly about how worried they had been, how they had dropped everything to be there despite arriving hours after the call. Over the next few days, as Grandpa began his recovery, a strange pattern emerged. My parents and Natalie suddenly became fixtures at the hospital and later at my grandparents' home during recovery. They had never shown such consistent attention before. Dad would bring gourmet meals Mom arranged for a premium home healthcare service, and Natalie volunteered to stay overnight several times to help Grandma. Their newfound devotion seemed odd, but I was too focused on Grandpa's recovery to dwell on it. I continued my regular visits while balancing work responsibilities, handling the practical matters my grandparents needed help with: insurance paperwork, medication management, and coordinating with doctors. About 2 weeks into Grandpa's recovery, I arrived at their house to find my father and a man he introduced as a financial advisor from his bank leaving the study. Grandpa looked tired, and Grandma seemed confused about some documents they had been reviewing. When I asked what was going on, my father smoothly explained they were just helping update some financial matters given Grandpa's health scare. Something did not feel right. When I tried to join a subsequent meeting a few days later, my mother intercepted me in the hallway, suggesting I should take Grandma out for lunch instead. "It keeps her mind off her worries," she said, with unusual sweetness. "And your father and the advisor need to discuss some technical details with Edward that would just bore you anyway." My suspicions grew when I overheard snippets of conversations about family legacy and financial security. Once I caught Natalie and my mother reviewing some papers that were quickly tucked away when I entered the room. Natalie gave me a look that was both triumphant and secretive before making an excuse to leave. After weeks of this behavior, I finally confronted my parents as they were leaving one evening. "I need to know what you are planning with Grandpa and Grandma's estate," I said directly. "They seem vulnerable right now, and I am concerned about all these financial meetings." My father turned cold instantly. "That is none of your concern, Angelo. Your grandparents asked for our help in simplifying their affairs. Not everyone wants to deal with complex estate matters at their age." My mother added with a condescending smile, "Sweetie, you are so busy with your little computer job. We are just making sure everything is taken care of properly. There is no need for you to worry about these things." When I pressed further, my father became angry. "Frankly, Angelo, your grandparents are disappointed in how seldom you visit compared to Natalie. Perhaps you should focus more on being present for them rather than questioning our support." It was a blatant lie that cut deep. I visited far more often than Natalie ever had before Grandpa's heart attack. But the calculated way they dismissed my concerns left me speechless and worried. The true extent of their betrayal became clear a week later. I had stopped by unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon when everyone else was out. Grandpa was napping, and Grandma had gone to her weekly hair appointment with my mother. The house was quiet as I decided to use Grandpa's study to catch up on some work emails while waiting for them to return. While looking for a pen in his desk drawer, I found a folder labeled Revised Estate Plan 2025. My hands trembled as I opened it immediately, recognizing my father's law firm's letterhead. What I read left me cold with shock. The documents outlined amendments to my grandparents' will that would leave 90% of their considerable estate to Natalie, with my parents named as executors with broad powers. I would receive only a token inheritance, a small cash bequest that was less than 1% of their total wealth. More disturbing were the notes in my father's handwriting in the margins, outlining talking points to convince my grandparents Angelo is financially stable with his tech career. Natalie needs security for her future simplified administration through Richard and Diana as executors. It was all there, a calculated plan to cut me out while presenting it as reasonable concern for everyone. As I continued searching, I found my father's phone that he had apparently forgotten. Guilt warred with my need to understand what was happening. When I unlocked it using his birthday, I found text messages between him, my mother, and Natalie, discussing their plan explicitly. From Dad to Mom, and Natalie meeting went well. Edward still resistant to cutting Angelo out completely, but I emphasized Natalie's need for security, suggested 90-10 split as compromise. Working on Margaret, she is easier to persuade since the heart attack. From Natalie. What if Angelo finds out and talks to them? He has always been their favorite. From Mom. Worry. Richard is making sure all meetings happen when Angelo is at work. By the time they sign the new documents, it will be too late for him to interfere. I sat there, documents spread around me, feeling physically ill. My own parents were actively working to disinherit me in favor of my sister taking advantage of my grandparents' vulnerability after a health crisis. The calculated betrayal left me reeling. These were not just strangers or distant relatives, but my own parents plotting against me while pretending to care about my grandparents. I carefully returned everything exactly as I had found it, my mind racing with what to do next. Should I confront my grandparents? My parents? Would my grandparents even believe me over the coordinated influence of my parents and sister? For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone, facing a betrayal so profound I could barely process it. The next day, I arrived at my grandparents' house, determined to speak with my grandmother alone. I found her in the garden, tending to her prized roses, while my grandfather rested inside. With hands that could not stop shaking, I gently broached the subject. "Grandma, I need to talk to you about something important," I began. "I've noticed Dad and a financial advisor visiting a lot lately. Are they pressuring you and Grandpa to change your will?" Her eyes widened with surprise, but before she could answer, my mother appeared at the garden door. I had not even heard her car in the driveway. "There you are, Mom," she called out with false cheerfulness. Then, noticing our serious expressions, her tone changed. "What is going on here? I looked directly at my mother. "I know what you and Dad are doing." I saw the draft documents changing Grandpa and Grandma's will to favor Natalie. My mother's face hardened instantly. She turned to my grandmother. "You see what I was telling you about Angelo has been snooping through your private papers. He is just worried about being cut out because he knows how distant he's been compared to how much Natalie cares for you." "I am not the one being distant," I protested. "I have visited every week for years, while Natalie barely showed up until Grandpa got sick." The commotion brought my father and Natalie rushing from the house. Within minutes, the garden became a battlefield of accusations and counter-accusations. My father portrayed me as ungrateful and money-hungry, while I tried desperately to make my grandparents see the manipulation at play. "Angelo is just jealous that Natalie has always been closer to us," my mother said coldly. "He has his fancy tech job and has never needed family support. Natalie has always been the one who truly values family." Natalie, right on cue, began to cry. "I can't believe you would accuse us of this, Angelo. I have been sleeping on their couch for weeks to help Grandma at night, while you just drop by when it's convenient." It was a masterful performance that made my truthful protests sound hollow. The argument escalated until my grandfather appeared at the door, face pale with stress. "That's enough," he shouted before clutching his chest and leaning against the doorframe. My grandmother rushed to his side while my father turned to me with fury. "Look what you've done. Get out now before you cause him another heart attack." I left in a daze of hurt and confusion, wondering if I had just destroyed my relationship with my grandparents by trying to protect them. For the first time, I felt truly defeated by my parents' manipulation. They had successfully painted me as the villain, using my grandfather's health as the perfect weapon to silence me. 2 days passed with no word from anyone in my family. I threw myself into work, trying to distract from the pain of betrayal and worry for my grandparents. Then, unexpectedly, I received a call from Theodore Walker, my grandparents' longtime family lawyer and friend. "Angelo, I need to speak with you privately. Can you meet me at my office this afternoon?" he asked, his tone serious. 3 hours later, sitting in Theodore's wood-paneled office overlooking Puget Sound, I learned I was not as alone as I had thought. "Your grandparents came to see me 6 months ago with concerns about your parents' behavior," Theodore explained, placing a folder on the desk between us. "They suspected Richard and Diana were planning something regarding the inheritance and wanted to document their actual wishes clearly." He slid the folder toward me. Inside was a notarized will dated just 4 months prior, clearly stating that the estate would be divided equally between Natalie and me, with Theodore named as executor rather than my parents. "They love both you and your sister equally," Theodore continued, "but they have been increasingly concerned about the influence your parents have over Natalie and their attempts to control financial decisions." I felt a wave of relief, knowing my grandparents had seen through the manipulation, at least partially, but it didn't solve the immediate problem. "What about these new documents my parents are pushing them to sign?" I asked. Theodore leaned forward, his expression grave. "That is why I called you. Your grandfather contacted me yesterday, concerned about documents Richard has been presenting. He did not feel comfortable with the changes, but is worried about family conflict. From what you found, it appears they are using his health situation to pressure both of them." Over the next hour, Theodore and I formulated a plan. We gathered evidence of my parents' actions, including my detailed account of the documents and text messages I had seen. Theodore also revealed that 2 years earlier, he had helped my grandparents install a security system in their home, including cameras in the study after jewelry had gone missing during a family gathering. With my grandparents' permission, we could access footage that might show my parents pressuring them during recent meetings. More importantly, Theodore arranged for a formal family meeting at my grandparents' house, ostensibly to discuss the estate planning in a transparent way, with all parties present. 3 days later, We all gathered in my grandparents' library. My father arrived confident with a folder of documents ready for signatures. My mother and Natalie flanked my grandparents like protective guardians, though their protective attention had been absent most of my life until recently. I sat quietly next to Theodore, my heart pounding as my grandfather called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice stronger than it had been since his heart attack. "As you know, Margaret and I have been considering our estate plans following my health scare. Richard has kindly offered his legal expertise, and we appreciate that." My father nodded magnanimously. "Just helping family, Dad. We want to make sure everything is properly arranged for everyone." My grandfather continued, "Indeed. Which is why I asked Theodore to join us today. He has been our lawyer for 30 years and knows our wishes well." I caught the flash of annoyance on my father's face before he masked it. A slight nod from Theodore gave me courage for what was coming next. "Before we proceed," my grandfather said, "there is something Margaret and I need to clarify." He looked directly at my parents, his gaze unexpectedly steely. "We know what you have been trying to do." The room fell silent. My mother's nervous laugh broke the tension. "Whatever do you mean, Edward? We are just trying to help." My grandmother spoke up, her gentle voice firm. "We have watched you trying to manipulate us for years, Diana. Did you think we would not notice?" My grandfather continued. "We installed cameras in this study 2 years ago after Diana's diamond earrings disappeared during Thanksgiving. We have recordings of your conversations when you thought we were resting or out of earshot." The blood drained from my father's face. "That is a violation of privacy," he sputtered. "You cannot record people without their knowledge." In our own home, when we suspected undue influence, Theodore interjected smoothly. "The courts tend to side with elderly individuals protecting themselves from financial manipulation, Richard, as you well know." Then came the moment that changed everything. My grandfather sat up straight, years seeming to fall away as he took command of the room. "We were testing all of you," he announced. "The real estate holdings, the investments, everything has been a test of character, and now we know exactly where everyone stands." He nodded to Theodore, who distributed copies of a document to everyone present. "I am sorry to say that Richard, Diana, and Natalie, you have failed that test spectacularly. This is our final will and testament, signed and notarized this morning." I scanned the document, my eyes widening at what I read. "Angelo will be the sole inheritor of our estate," my grandfather declared. "He has demonstrated the character, work ethic, and integrity we value. He has visited us consistently for years without any expectation of reward, while the rest of you only showed interest when there was something to gain." The explosion was immediate. My father jumped to his feet, face contorted with rage. "You cannot do this," he shouted. "We are your daughter, and son-in-law Natalie is your granddaughter." My mother turned to attack me. "You did this. You turned them against us." Always playing the victim, always the perfect grandson, while poisoning them against Natalie, Natalie burst into tears. But this time, they were real tears of shock and anger, rather than the calculated performances I had seen before. "This is not fair," she screamed. "You always loved him more." My grandfather raised a hand, silencing the chaos. "We have video evidence of you planning to change our will without our informed consent. We have text messages Angelo discovered that prove conspiracy. If you contest this, all of that becomes public record in court. Is that what you want?" The threat of public exposure seemed to hit my father hardest. As a corporate lawyer, his reputation would be destroyed by evidence of elder financial abuse. He grabbed the document, scanning it frantically for loopholes. "There is a provision," my grandmother added softly. "If Angelo chooses, he may provide for Natalie in the future. But that will be his decision, not yours, and certainly not guaranteed, given how you have all treated him." The meeting ended with my parents and Natalie storming out, threats of legal action dissolving into bitter accusations against me. As the front door slammed, my grandparents and I were left in a silence that felt both devastating and oddly peaceful. The revelation left me with conflicted emotions. While vindicated, I felt no joy in the family fracture that followed. My grandparents and I sat in the quiet library after everyone left processing what had just happened. We have been watching this pattern for years. Angelo, my grandfather, explained. The way they treated you, the way they only showed interest in us when they wanted something. The heart attack just accelerated their plans. My grandmother reached for my hand. We love Natalie too, she said softly, but we cannot reward manipulation and entitlement. The inheritance was never just about money. It was about preserving values and ensuring our legacy continues with someone who understands its true worth. In the months that followed, my parents and Natalie made several attempts to challenge the will through legal threats, then through flying monkeys, in the form of extended family, and finally through guilt trips. Each attempt failed as Theodore had ensured the will was ironclad with clear evidence of their manipulation documented. Eventually, they stopped contacting me altogether. Christmas came and went without a word. My birthday passed unacknowledged. The family I was born into had effectively disowned me because I could no longer be exploited. The pain of that rejection was real, despite years of emotional distance. My grandfather recovered fully and began teaching me about managing the family business interests. Twice a week, we would review property holdings, investment strategies, and long-term planning. My software engineering background proved useful in modernizing their record-keeping systems and identifying new technology investment opportunities. I moved into the guest house on my grandparents' property both to be closer to them and to provide additional security against any further manipulation attempts. We installed better security systems and changed all their financial advisors to prevent any backdoor influence from my parents. The healing process was not easy. Some nights I would lie awake, wondering how my own parents could so callously attempt to erase me from the family legacy. Therapy helped me process the anger and betrayal, focusing instead on gratitude for my grandparents' wisdom and love. 1 year after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from Natalie. It was not an apology, but a request for financial help with a new business venture. There was no acknowledgement of her role in the attempted manipulation, just an assumption that I would now give her money since I was set to inherit everything. I did not respond. My grandparents taught me that wealth comes with responsibility. Together, we established a foundation focusing on educational opportunities for first-generation college students from low-income backgrounds. Helping others who worked hard despite family challenges became my way of creating meaning from the painful experience. Today, my grandparents are still going strong in their 80s. We travel together, enjoy Sunday dinners, and continue building both the business and the foundation. I have dated a few times, always cautious about whether someone is interested in me or the inheritance I will someday receive. Trust does not come easily after family betrayal. The most valuable inheritance was never the money or properties. It was the lessons my grandparents taught me. Integrity cannot be bought. Character reveals itself in difficult times, and family is defined by love and trust, not blood or obligation. I sometimes wonder if reconciliation with my parents and sister might be possible someday, perhaps when the wounds are less raw, when the betrayal is not so fresh in memory. But for now, I am at peace with the family I have, rather than longing for the one that tried to discard me. Has your family ever chosen money over relationship? Have you had to create boundaries with toxic relatives? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself sometimes means standing alone, but not always. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we are born into.